Congressional Dish Podcast.
Yes. Tinfoil hat.
If you want to check us out on all of our social media platforms, on Twitter at Tinfoil Hat Cast, reddit.com/r/tinfoil hat show,
On Instagram at Tinfoil Hat Pod.
or allcomedytshirts.com.
Email us at
Tinfoilhat.
tinfoilhatpod@gmail.com.
Welcome back to another episode of Tinfoil Hat. Tinfoil Hat. Tinfoil Hat. Come with me into the waters of conspiracy with Sam Tripoli.
Sam Tripoli.
Tripoli.
Sam Tripoli.
Mr. Sam Tripoli.
With my friend Ryan Davis.
Hi, Ryan.
We're the
doing
first
this
gay
'cause-
couple of conspiracy theories.
I think it's beautiful, man.
Out there, partner. Say that again.
It's some mystical, deep, dark realm, crazy shit.
Wake up, Aaron. There's reptile people everywhere.
Hey man, we're spitting truth there, dog.
Oh, what the fuck are you guys even talking about?
Are you ready to get your mind blown?
Revolution will be podcasted.
Yes, I can't hear myself. Can you hear me? I can't hear. Can you hear me, Aaron? I can't hear myself. But, why not? There we go. I still can't hear myself. But welcome to the Tinfoil Hat Podcast. You know who we are. You know what we're here to do. We got an entirely packed studio. But I want to get into a little business first. Of course, June 1st is the big date. Tinfoil Hat Comedy Night at Cobb's in San Francisco. Eddie Bravo, Ryan Davis, myself, Trez. We are coming out and we are doing a night of comedy at Cobb's. So we got to get 200 people who bring one friend to pack that room out. It's going to be a night of comedy, conspiracies, and podcasting. Here's what we're going to do. First going to do some stand-up, then we're going to podcast at the end, and then whoever brings the most people gets a private podcast in the green room with Eddie, myself, Ryan, and Trez, smoking weed, talking lizard people, going deep. So whoever brings the most people, you just got to take a picture of everybody you brought with you, take a giant picture, and how many you got, and whoever wins comes to the back. And that is June 1st at Cobb's. Go to cobbscomedyclub.com. And then June 2nd in Sacramento at the Punchline in Sacramento. We're doing it again. And if these shows sell out, Live Nation's going to put us on the road. I will also be April 10th at the La Jolla Comedy Store headlining. We're putting together the lineup, so it's the 10th, 11th, 12th. It's basically that Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm going to be out there. I'm going to try to bring Brenton Billicombe. We'll see if he can come out and rock out. So that's our show. That's the business. We'll get into how I look so good at the end. But I want to bring on our guest, our first guest. She does the Congressional Dish Podcast. I'm super excited to have her on. Please welcome Jennifer Briney. Did I nail it?
You did.
Boom.
Well done.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm super excited to have him on. I just did his live podcast at the Flappers. I was super excited. Anytime he asked me to do that, it means the world to me. I did do a fisting joke in the show, and I feel bad about it. From the Jimmy Dore show. Please welcome Jimmy Dore.
It's a pleasure to be here, Sam. I enjoy fisting jokes.
I don't know how to pull it in that. I don't know if
I
it's
think
too much or not enough.
I think it was fantastic. Everybody, it's a nightclub. We're all drinking. I'm drinking martinis. I'm drunk most of that show.
Yeah.
So I don't have any problem with a fisting
And
joke.
the train goes off the rails, and it's wonderful. We were getting positively heckled by Right Said Fred, the guy who sings "I'm Too Sexy for This." Did you notice that? And he just started yelling like, I forget who he was yelling at, but I'm just like, sit down, dude. And they're nice enough; they just sit down. It's the weirdest thing. They positively heckle you, but then when you tell them to shut up, they shut up.
Yeah. They're progressives. He was a progressive on steroids, is what
Yeah.
it looked like. And he was like, "I'll take a bullet for you." I'm like, "Okay, all right, buddy, just sit down. You're scaring people."
So how long have you been going down this road of doing this political show? Because it seems like it's really gotten some momentum going, and you're doing an amazing thing.
Well, I started doing my last hour special on Comedy Central was all politics. It was called Citizen Jimmy, and that got that. Then I started doing a show at the UCB Theater, and it was called Poppin' Politics. And then somebody from KPFK Radio saw that show, and then they invited me to do a radio show at KPFK. So I had to put together a radio show, and that's where the Jimmy Dore radio show happened, and that's the show that we're talking about now. And then it was mostly like me just trying to be funny about politics, right? And it was fun. I got to say what I... And now lately, I started working with the Young Turks, which is that online news show. And they do, they're more of a serious news, and I'm more of a jackass. And but it turns out it's not that hard to be a good news person. People say to me, Jimmy, what's the secret to your show? How come it's so popular? What happened? What have you been doing? I go, all you have to do is tell the truth about Syria, and I'm already the best newsman in America.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's it. And so that's why, and I don't have any, I didn't come up through news or journal. I don't want to be part of their club. Their club is a corrupt club that I don't want anything to do with. They beat the drum for war every time. They're the thing we have to resist is the corporate media. You know what I mean? So I don't want to be part of their club, and it's very easy for me to tell the truth about stuff, and people will smear you. I've been smeared by the Washington Post for telling the truth about stuff, just for talking about stuff. And so it's funny to see it happen. And right now it's funny because they can't control social media, but they are figuring out how to do it. So they're getting rid of people's Facebook pages. They're throttling people's YouTube. They just admitted that they don't send people notifications when you drop a video, even though they're subscribed. YouTube admitted they don't send it to all the people that are subscribed to your channel. Anyway, so they're doing lots of things. They're throttling places like Alternet and Truth Dig and Common Dreams and all kinds of stuff on the right too. So it's not that hard to be a good newsman in America because they suck pretty bad.
And I just finding that's yours. And now tell us a little bit about Congressional Dish. Graham Elwood told me about your podcast, and I was like, wow, that sounds so interesting. And I really appreciate the work you put into that, because I don't know anybody else who'd want to do this, going through all these bills and all that stuff. And I thought it'd be really cool to get all of us on to kind of discuss some of the stuff that you've seen coming out.
Yeah, I started it just because I had been watching C-SPAN. I don't know why I do these things, but I was just like watching it. I was high, I was cleaning, and I saw a congressman slip something into an energy and water bill that was protecting secret campaign contributions. The only reason I knew is because he was bragging about it. So I was like, there's no way I actually heard that correctly. So that's when I looked in the congressional record. I'm kind of familiar with it. And I saw that it was what I thought it was. I saw it in the bill. So I was like, how often are they slipping stuff in the law that we don't know about it? So I started reading it. This was like 2012, and I started looking more regularly. I was finding shit all the time. And the scariest part is I would look at Rachel Maddow, or I'd turn on CNN, or I'd even go to the blogs. No one was talking about it. And so that's when I realized, like, I do have this thing where I'm just not afraid to look in legislation. That language doesn't intimidate me. I was like, this is a thing that I could do. I think it would help the situation in some way, at least like the energy I'm putting towards my job. I'm not slinging burgers anymore. So it's like, okay, I'll do this. And I started the podcast, but I do it as me. I'm basically picturing my little sister.
You do it as your name? You don't have like some weird kind of pseudonym or something?
I thought about doing a fake name actually, but I was like, I'm just going to own it. And I'm not trying to be NPR. I'm not trying to be a CNN. I'm amazed by this stuff. I swear on the show. I play stupid clips. I make it fun and interesting. I'm making the show I want to hear, but I'm focusing on Congress. Wonderful. Yeah, it's fun. But the Congress part, we need to be paying attention to it. That's the only reason I'm doing it. And I just want to get regular people, not the people that are already into politics. I want to be like, no, look at what they're fucking doing, because it affects your paycheck. It affects your health. The environmental stuff is terrifying. So it's like, I just want people to stop paying so much attention to the Trump show and start watching the stuff that's actually affecting us.
We definitely, C-SPAN is wonderful. I could watch the House of Commons all the time.
Oh, they're the best.
It is like Congress meets your mama's competition. I wish we had more of that. We get so angry.
They boo each other.
I love it.
It's kind of like a roast battle.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. But see, they have that. That's got to be such a cathartic thing to watch. Wouldn't it be awesome to watch like our politicians yell at the president 5 feet away from him. Wouldn't that be great? I mean, no matter who the president is, Trump, Obama, Bush, it doesn't matter. It would be great to see the opposition actually go, hey, this war is bullshit.
Yeah.
And oh my God, that would be, I mean, that's why I think Trump won the primaries, because he attacked everybody over the Iraq war, which everyone thought was taboo. You can't do that. No, the people want to see somebody confronted over that still.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And I think there's something about England or Europe versus the United States in that we're very new. We're only like 350 years old, whatever it is. And they've been through a lot, like centuries and centuries and centuries of tyranny that I think they could smell it when they see it. I'm not saying they're perfect, but they seem to be like, okay, Monsanto, get out of here. You know, there seems to be a little more checks and balances. Not that everything is checked, but I don't think we do that. I don't think we see it. And we never had royals, but I'm telling you right now, corporates, giant international corporations are our versions of royal families. They live above the law. They pay no taxes. When they get caught on something, there's no punishment for it. They run wild and we do nothing.
Well, and that's what I wasn't looking for it. But in the 5 years of reading the bills and stuff, that's what I'm finding. Is it's just corporate favor after corporate favor, and it's never ending. And when you see that that's the game, that they're writing the rules for the companies and not for us, you can't not see it anymore. It's everywhere. It's in everything.
So didn't they just pass a law that said that you can't sue the banks when they defraud you? Didn't they pass a law similar to that?
I mean, that's in a few of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what I'm scared of is they just passed a 2,232-page law. It's funding our government 6 months late. This thing is a beast. And the financial services section, I'm afraid to read it. I haven't been able to do it yet. But they have been trying to deregulate the banks ever since this Congress started, which was the same time as the Trump administration. And so the financial services section is going to be an absolute nightmare. I don't know what they got in yet, but they got something.
So what they did was the Dodd-Frank regulations applied to all banks that were worth $50 billion or more. So what they're doing is raising that limit to $250 billion, which means, except for a handful of banks, the Dodd-Frank won't apply. So those banks are going to be free to now go gamble with our money, because it's FDIC insured. And so when it goes bankrupt, we're going to bail them out because they're still too big. They're bigger to fail than they were when they failed the last time. So people know what's happening. They see all the gains of the economy going to the 1%. They see this kind of legislation. They saw that. Wells Fargo admitted to defrauding like 3.1 million of their own customers. Nobody went to jail. Isn't that?
You only go to jail if you rip off rich people.
Yeah.
If we look at this, the drug kid, and then you have Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff is one of a few that actually went to jail during that whole crisis because he ripped off
rich people.
Rich people.
That's right.
And if you rip off poor people, it's like, oh, you're crazy. Go play tennis.
Yeah, we'll promise not to do it again.
We have an unchecked government. I don't know what the answer is, because what change has to come from the people that are abusing it. So we're literally asking them to make rules that regulate themselves.
So this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, because when I realized how our system works, I actually saw a path that didn't involve a lot of us dying, and that's my dream is that we decide at one point to take control of the House of Representatives in particular, because they control all the money. You can stop all this shit if you control the money. And the House of Representatives, we can re-vote them every 2 years. So you can fire all of them, rehire them. It's the only hope I have, because we don't have a lot of control over the Senate. And the thing that makes me nuts is when you turn on the TV, you're seeing the Trump show all the time, executive branch all the time. We have very little control over that. But Congress is ours, and we take no responsibility for it. We don't know what's happening there. We don't know who represents us there. And so if we can just focus on that, and I know this is naive and it's probably never going to happen, but it could.
It could happen.
And that's why I'm just like, Congress.
Watch
Congress.
You're talking about the UK, and one of the differences between the UK is, they do have the House of Lords, but they don't have the Senate. right? So the Senate is unequal representation. It's supposed to be one man, one vote. But if you live in Montana or South Dakota or any of those states like that, you are way overrepresented, right? Because there's about as many people who live in Montana who are in my congressional district, yet I only get 2 senators and they get 2 senators. That's crazy, right? So they're overrepresented, and the Senate is there. And the fact that we still have the Electoral College, which has reversed the will of the people 40% of the time this century, and no one is trying to get rid of it. What does that tell you? I mean, this is a system that's left over that was invented by a bunch of syphilitic slave owners to make sure that the power, that they didn't get corrupted by the people, the will of the people. This was their check in case, and literally the Electoral College was there so we wouldn't have an unqualified buffoon as in the presidency. This would be a check on that.
Oh, it's to stop. They literally said it's meant to stop a grassroots movement.
That's what it's really there for.
That's really what it's all about. And the problem is with this is that all the electoral votes were promised to Hillary before. They literally say, oh, I'm going to give you my vote regardless of what happens. And then Bernie Sanders happens on such a huge level. And nobody seemed to be upset. Like, everybody's upset about Russia rigging the elections. Nobody cares that before that, this woman had to rig her own primary just to get to the national.
It was the biggest election fraud in the history of the United States, and no one talks about it. They want to talk about 13 Twitter trolls, right?
Yeah, they had her like 400 votes ahead before they had even counted anything.
Yeah.
Dude, on MSNBC, they literally said that they were going to call it before he's even close to over. And I almost think he did that to be like, hey, man, some shady shit's going on. Because you saw towards the end, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but towards the end, right before the vote was coming, a couple people on MSNBC is like, she's not good. And I'm like, either they're like throwing out some weird kind of fucking bat signal for us to know something's up, or they just realized the rig is in, and they didn't see it coming. And what happened was in this FISA vote, which is this FISA thing is so crazy that nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about
You mean the parallel construction part of it?
Yeah,
So,
everything.
Have you talked about that part? So if people don't know what that is, so they have us in a surveillance state. So what they're only supposed to be doing that for is, I guess we agreed to give up our rights to fight terrorism, which I don't think we did. But anyway, so the government has imposed a surveillance state, and they're only supposed to use that to catch the bad guys being terrorists, but they use it to catch normal crimes. And they'll alert local police force, and they'll go, here's the evidence that we got unconstitutionally. So now you have to go create the same evidence, but constitutionally. So you have to wipe out that we gave you this evidence. We're showing you what it is, but no, now you go get the same evidence yourself, parallel construction. And that's what William Briney has talked about, and that's why they tried to throw him in jail. But he's outsmarted them, of course. He was the biggest code breaker the NSA ever had, so he outsmarted the FBI. They tried to plant false stuff on him and tried to get him. So anyway, that's one part of the FISA court. The other part of the FISA court is it's not a court. A court implies that you have an adversary, right? There isn't. It's just a bunch of crooks from the FBI who admitted to lying to the FISA court in 2002 at least 40 times. They go and they present evidence one-sided to a judge. That's it. There's nothing. It's a joke. That's not a court. That's what dictators do. Oh, we have a court. It's in secret and nobody gets to see what happens. That's not a court.
And when you get it 99% of the time, why are we even presenting at this point?
Yeah.
It's just like sign it off. And like with the exception of the 13 trolls, most of the people who got any kind of Mueller indicted, they all have former ties to the Clintons. They all do. Carter Page worked on his transition team back when Clinton was coming into Bill Clinton got elected.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he used to work on the Clintons' transition team, and then Manoff used to work for the Podestas.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Manafort? You mean?
Yeah, Manafort. Excuse me.
Yeah, so he funneled money. Yeah. Manafort funneled money from the Ukraine.
From the old administration, the one that we overthrew, which I find fascinating.
Yes. And this was before he ever worked for Trump. That's what they're getting him on.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, even the indictment, it's 31 pages, not that hard to read. And if you take the time to read it, they're getting indicted for basically identity theft and wire fraud. Like, there was no collusion. It had nothing to do with our elections. It was.
So, it's funny to watch.
But they just keep saying that word collusion. Over and over again.
That's all you have to do is say it. And you know what I hate the most, and I talked about this at our show Friday, was how the neoliberal establishment media has rehabilitated the George Bush war criminal administration. Every time I turn on the TV, they have one of these guys on to critique Trump and talk about how the world doesn't respect us anymore. Are you out of your mind? You guys lit the Middle East on fire. You had the whole world against us, and you had the whole world with us after 9/11, and you blew that opportunity. And now Anderson Cooper brings on these pieces of shit to fucking criticize the Trump. It's like you're supposed to just dismiss those guys. Is there anything you can do that gets you out of David Frum? I mean, these guys they were part of a war criminal organization, and these guys, he's now the head of the Atlantic, David Frum, and they bring on this guy Richard Painter, which was Bush's ethics lawyer. They trot this guy out, and he's on all the time, and they're all there to scare us about how bad Trump is. So Trump might be bad and everything, but Jesus Christ, he has yet to start an illegal war.
No, dude, you have the lady who's now in charge of the CIA. You have Dick Cheney. You have
torturer.
George Bush. They can't leave the country. If they go to Europe, they get arrested immediately for war crimes.
Yeah.
So, but Ellen's going to take a selfie with George Bush, a war criminal. Everybody's going to then cringe, and then everybody's going to cringe about John Bolton being a coming. Well, it's like, guess who fucking made that guy's career? George Bush. So it's just isn't it weird to see and the Obamas are tweeting together and with the Bush. And everybody's been rehabilitated except for Dick Cheney from that. And what did you think about that when you saw Ellen take that picture with him? Right?
Well, I just like we're in conspiracy world here. You know, the people she's had on is unbelievable. If you don't believe that she's part of the whole Mockingbird thing, the Operation Mockingbird.
You think the CIA has gotten to her? Because the CIA certainly infiltrates media. That's not a secret.
Yeah.
Right? But it is a secret to most people in the country. They'll think you're crazy. It's like, no, here's the actual documents. Here's the thing. Here's them admitting it. Here's the church committee. Yeah. Here's the whole, it's in Wikifrickinpedia.
People who blow up too big, I'm always suspect of. There's always something like, and then you go through it after a while, you're like, oh, there was a giant connection there. I mean, you know, we're in the world, and I don't want to get too much into it here, but it's just like we're in the world conspiracies. We're very much into false flag stuff. There's always a connection to the CIA. There's always a connection to the FBI.
Did you know the CIA actually funded abstract art?
Yeah, dude.
Did you know about that?
No. Tell me this.
So they were afraid of, art that could be turned into movements and revolutions and stuff. So they funded abstract art because it doesn't really inspire revolution or people to activate or to do anything, or it's not a call to action. So they would fund that. And they also funded ballet and certain things. It was all about suppressing socialist movements and the power of the people. I was just reading about this. It's fucking crazy, the stuff they've done.
The Grateful Dead, huge CIA connections from the guy who, how
about Moby? Do you know Moby admits that CIA?
Yeah.
Right? Do you know that he was?
Who's the most famous feminist?
Okay, it's Gloria. Gloria Steinem.
There's a argument that she basically was a connection too. Like it's called controlled opposition, dude.
Yeah.
Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, that was swept under the rug very quickly when it came out. They were either FBI or CIA assets. It's just like crazy, dude.
So here's a conspiracy with Al Sharpton. So you know how he got that show on MSNBC? No one does, right? Because he was so horrible. And so when Comcast wanted to buy NBC, they couldn't, right? They had to get the approval of the FCC. And there's a 3-person board. They needed, I think it was maybe a 3-person board. They needed 2 votes. They had 1. And so the one woman they needed was a black woman. So they got Al Sharpton to write an article saying how this would be good for black people if they did this. So then the woman changes her vote. She cites Al Sharpton's editorial as the reason why she changed her vote. They get to buy it. He gets a TV show. And the reason why I know this is because I looked into it, because the reason they gave for Cenk Uygur was the guy who had that time slot before Al Sharpton, and he was winning his time slot. And they decided to move him to the weekend because they wanted to work on his presentation skills. Really? His presentation skills weren't up to it for the guy who reads at a fourth grade level,
Yeah.
is going to go sit there in front of a. Did you ever see him try to read the teleprompter?
No.
It was painful to watch. I mean, I'm not. I like to listen to Al Sharpton's speeches. Actually, he's a great orator, but he's a horrible reader. And when he tried to do teleprompter reading, it was painful. I used to have videos I'd play on my show about it. It was funny.
They're probably just like spitball after a while.
So that's the conspiracy with Al Sharpton and how he got that show. Nobody looked at that and went, what the hell is going on here? Of all the people to give a show to, I mean, if you want to go after African Americans, there's lots of African Americans who can read a teleprompter.
Oh, and then he always shows up on all these things that create tension between everybody. And when he's wrong on stuff, he never apologizes. He just slips into the night. It's all crazy, dude. I mean, we go super deep on this stuff. I want to talk about your podcast and things that you found on your show. What are some of the more egregious bills or stuff that's been slipped in the bills that you can that you want to talk about? I know you sent us a little list.
Yeah, the one that happened, it wasn't even that long ago, was the $4 billion blank check to the intelligence agencies. I can't really get over that one because it was just so shady the way that this went down. So I have to give you a short backstory on how our government works, just in case we don't know.
No, it's totally fine.
But
Do you think that's the type of check you can take a photo of and just like use your mobile app for?
Chase Bank photo.
Well, it's the CIA. I mean, what can't they do? But yeah, so our government is funded by 12 separate committees. It's supposed to be 12 different bills that are all done by September 30th, right? And when they don't do this, then we have the threats of the shutdowns. Well, you've noticed that we've had a threat every single month for the last 6 months. I think we're all aware of this. And every time that happens, they're temporarily funding the government for a certain amount of time. And because that's a must-sign law, they attach shit to it that just sails into law.
Oh my
So that's what
God.
that 2,000-page bill is. It's just full of stuff. But so we've had this 5 times. There were 5 temporaries and then the 2,000-pager. Well, on the third, I believe, there was $4 billion that was for missile defense. And I took way too much time tracking where it was going. And it was definitely for missile defense in different countries or whatever. In the next one, they changed it and they said that provision that had the $4 billion for missile defense in the last law, well, that can be transferred anywhere in the intelligence communities without telling Congress. And the way I found this out, this is going to make you crazy. I found out because Senator Richard Burr, who is the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, so he's supposed to be like the main cop on the beat, but he's actually just kind of like, what can I do for you guys? Like, you need money, blowjobs, like, what do you need?
Right.
Well, he got up in the Senate and he said, this is offensive to me that this got put in here. I want it taken out. He was ignored. It became law. So $4 billion, we have no idea. They just gave it to the intelligence community. This was that was January 22nd.
I mean, we are running at from Bush to Obama to Trump. Like, we are in $1 trillion was it 23 trillion now? I mean,
Something like that.
We are, I don't know where does this money come from, man?
Well, we make our own money.
Yeah, it's not real.
It's not real. We make our own money. That's why they could just do endless
The
quantitative.
petrodollar.
Well, there's that.
It's numbers on a screen at this point.
We print our own money. That's the problem with the European Union is that when a country goes into a recession, you're supposed to deficit spend to go till you get out of that. Well, they can't because they can't print their own currency. Now they're all using the euro, which is why what happened to Greece, and what's going to happen to Spain is going to keep happening. And so it's going to keep getting worse. Well, that's why things are not good. All right, neoliberalism is failing. Where the banks
Can you define neoliberalism?
I don't know if I can give you a great definition, but I'll tell you what neoliberalism is to me. It's the commodification of everything in the world. It's the privatization of all government services. It's what we're living in right now, what they call a free market. It's when you try to have capitalism solve everything, like, we'll have charter schools.
Right.
And, and we'll get rid of unions and we'll have right to work states.
Private armies, too.
And we'll have mercenaries, so nobody will ever stop a war. And so that, to me, that's neoliberalism. And it's outsourcing of jobs, right? That's good for our corporate profits, so that's good for everybody. No, it's good for a handful of motherfuckers, and everybody else loses.
Are you pro or anti-tariff, or what is your take on that?
You know, I'm on the fence on tariffs. I think the way that what's even a bigger problem is that we have incentivized outsourcing jobs, literally giving. That's how corrupt our government is. That we literally give tax breaks to people. It's written into bills. So if you send a job overseas, you'll make more money.
Why do they do that?
Because they own the legislators, and now we live in an oligarchy. We don't live in a democracy.
Well, I've been asking myself that question, and I think it's a fuzzy picture. But what I've witnessed, and it's the people saying this are like John McCain, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden. I mean, the big ones, right? They want to have a global economic system that started around Bretton Woods. It was right after World War II. They're trying to have a system that is global. They want all countries involved. And so when a country doesn't want to have these economic, like the rules they're pushing are the ones that Jimmy just said. But what they do is they have the International Monetary Fund come in, say, we're going to give you a ton of money that you'll never be able to pay back.
Yeah, they set it up so there's no way to pay this back.
Yes.
No chances. So they go in there, they give you these loans, and they say, we'll give you more money to keep your lights on as long as you change your laws to match our system. And that works until, the people fight back, and that's when the regime change happens. As soon as people get pissed, that's when the regime changes. And that's why we're in all these countries, because we're the muscle. And so once you start to see those dots lining up, you can understand all of it. They're pushing this global system, which is treasonous as fuck, because they don't care about the United States worker. They want to get the whole world in this thing, even if it screws us, because it's going to be better for everyone. After it's all done, we'll all be peaceful because we'll all be in the same system. And that's, am I crazy?
No, you
here?
are 100%
Okay.
on. And that's why it's so funny to see people freak out about Muslim terrorism when the biggest terrorist in the world is the United States. And we've set the world, we set the Middle East on fire. We did Iraq, Afghanistan. We're still in Afghanistan, right? So 17 years, 3 more years, that war gets a gold watch. Yeah.
We look at Wesley
Libya. Look what we did to Libya. People don't even talk about that. I watch the news how they cover Libya, and it's bullshit how they cover it. And so then I'll do a video. Hey, here's what CNN's not telling you about Libya, and they demonetize that video, right? And so then we did Syria. Why are we in Syria? We really care about people. If we really cared about people, maybe we wouldn't be helping Saudi Arabia commit a genocide in Yemen right now. So why are we there? No one ever asked these questions. Why are we there? I was on another podcast, and the guy says, well, we're trying to help people. Assad is killing his own people. And that's why we were funding Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria, because we care about people. So isn't it amazing, too, to everybody how it's so easy for them to keep us afraid? It was, Al-Qaeda, they're suicide bombers. Then they had to go one up, and then they go to ISIS. They have kitchen knives.
Oh, did you hear? ISIS is done now. They're just done with ISIS. They took Henry Kissinger out of whatever coffin he lives in, and he goes into Congress, and he's like, well, now that ISIS is over. And I'm just like, wait. When did that happen? Yeah. And it's that now it's Russia. We have a new boogeyman.
We have a new boogeyman.
Well, we have
Russia.
a whole bunch of things going on with that. I'm actually, I believe that everything's done for a reason, and it's a long game. I believe free trade. You send all the jobs out. What options do people have? Oh, you could join the military for a job, and we are the stormtroopers. I hate to say it. We are forced to pay into a system to fund the military industrial complex. If we do not, we get thrown into jail, okay? Yeah. We are everywhere, man. This is all done on purpose.
What people don't realize is that we didn't have such a bloated Pentagon. We had a bloated Pentagon budget before 9/11, and then after 9/11, it ramped up to about $500 billion, right? And people are like, well, we got to spend it because we have to fight terrorism. Well, those wars are supposed to be winding down, Afghanistan and Iraq. We're now spending $700 billion. We're spending 40% more on the military than we were at the height of the Iraq and Afghanistan war, and nobody says a goddamn thing about it. There's not one town hall. Anderson Cooper doesn't go and roll up his sleeves and interview people. There's no op-eds. There's no discussion. They just did it like that, which proves that Briney was right, and we could all have health care and free college, and we could all have a living wage, except these motherfucking neoliberals don't want you to have it.
I mean, if you look at like when a huge change happens in this country is Vietnam. And Vietnam, and I kind of talked about this the first time I did your live show about everybody marching together. That scares the shit out of them. And that was Vietnam. Everybody was like, enough of this war. And after that, you see them start freaking out, pulling money out of education, getting everybody to fight with each other. After Vietnam comes who? Like Reagan comes in, helps start the deregulation of the media, in which the Clintons pound on them after. So now it's like we got this Sinclair thing going on. And I love how everybody's coming out and going, look at Sinclair. They're doing this evil stuff. You're like, oh, really, HBO? How about you guys putting a fucking hit out on all three of the third-party candidates?
That was okay, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, you don't think John Oliver or Bill Maher got a memo going, pound these motherfuckers, man? And it's all together, man. It's all together. So now, we see at the 9/11, Wesley Clark does this thing. It's the hammer and the nail, which is like, when you're a hammer, I guess every problem is a nail. And he lists these countries to go through. Well, these countries also are the ones that did not have centralized banks. So it was like 8 to 9 countries that did not have centralized banks that we are now bombing the fuck out of. Yeah.
And when you say this, people look at you like you're crazy. Like, oh, I can't. I'm like, what else could it be? And Wesley Clark knew after 9/11, he saw the paper. These are the countries we're going to go into, and son of a bitch, we're going into every one of those countries.
Yes, we are.
It's amazing.
It's all banker wars, man. You look through everything. Even the Tonka 9/11, there's all this shady shit that goes on. You're like, whoa,
But
dude.
it's not just bankers, because a lot of this has to do with fossil fuels.
Yes.
A lot of it is protecting their supply lines, and we're the muscle for it. You have to, that's why I don't like to focus on one industry. It's fucking all of them.
Yeah.
We have an economy that's built on the stock market, which is a casino.
Yes.
And the people that have the most money in the casino are the ones that are running all this shit too. And that's why I like to look at all the industries and the way it all goes together. Because it's a corporatocracy. It's just global. Like NAFTA and the World Trade Organization, all that. There's a court system there that lets these companies sue governments basically to get laws overturned that they don't like. Like when you go to the grocery store, we have labels on our meat, so it's like, this is where your cow comes from. This is where your chicken comes from. Well, on beef and I believe pork products a couple of years ago, as a dingleberry to some must-sign law, they overturned that because of a World Trade Organization thing that went against us. We were telling Canada that they had to label their beef, and that was unfair trade because it was more work for them. So we lost the court. There was no outcry from the American people being like, I don't want to know where my cow comes from.
California just did that. We just literally voted down knowing what's in our food.
Because it's World Trade Organization illegal. So our tax money ends up going to paying these fines and stuff because, or you have to get rid of the law. And that's something else that our Congress people know. We've given up a lot of our sovereignty. There's certain laws that we want that they know is going to be a problem in this international system. But most of us don't know that there's that fight even going on.
Oh my God.
So, that's another, shows you how corrupt both parties are, right? So with the system, to me, I think the answer has to be a third party and a guy who could, well, here's an example is in California, right? You just talked about how they voted against what people want. We have a super majority of Democrats in California. So they can pass anything they want without any help from any of the Republicans. And guess what? We still can't have nice shit. We still can't have nice shit. We still have fracking. We still don't have single payer in this state.
Homeless everywhere.
Homeless everywhere. 6th largest economy in the world, California. We can handle single payer. We can pull it off. And we got a guy named Anthony Rendon, who's the Speaker of the Assembly, who claims, he says, I was forcing, they all say they're for it, except they can't figure out a way to pass it. Like, well, where's your fucking bill? If you're so for it, how do you do it? Oh, I don't know. Well, you're just the leader. How would you figure it out? So and then you see Jerry Brown get in bed with the Clintons. That was so disgusting. And he's in bed with the frackers. So I think the answer to these, we're living in a banana republic.
We are.
It is, well, they did the study at Princeton that showed that the 80% of the country, what we want to have happen in legislation has no correlation to what actually happens. It's the top 10% of earners. So if 20% of the top 10% of earners want something, 20% of the time it gets passed. If 40% of the time the top 10% want 40, so that it correlates perfectly with what they want, but what we want, nothing, which is why 90% of the people, or 80% of people wanted a public option when Barack Obama was passing that thing, the Obamacare, and we didn't get it.
Do you remember when Obama went to Germany to give speeches when the whole debate was going on in the United States? He literally, and that's when I go, oh man, he's fucking in on it, dude. He just, I go, you're the champion in this, and now you're going to Europe to talk and while your debate's going on? It's Unbelievable.
Dude, they gave him a peace prize. He immediately ramped up the war in Afghanistan, started bombing Libya, put a hit on Osama bin Laden, and ran out of bombs in 2016. Ran out of bombs. And that's the thing about those peace prizes. Nobody ever tries to win a second one.
Well, and even Obama, we say that he started 3 wars because Libya and Syria are the obvious. Ukraine. He did
that's
Ukraine.
Right. There's
It was
Ukraine.
3.
He also got us into Somalia before he left. People don't know that. And then we were.
I don't know that.
We were. Yeah. He started. He sent bombs into and troops into Somalia. I did a video about it. And plus, Yemen, you have to count.
You'd have to count that, yeah.
And we found out we're in Niger. You didn't know what we are.
I
We're
don't even
all
know
over
where
Africa.
that is.
Yeah.
If you read the defense authorization, we're all over Africa. It's insane.
Yes.
I mean, we want to go after Iran because they're a threat, but if you look at
They're
it,
not a threat.
we have literally
No, they're not
30
threat.
bases all around them.
Yeah.
We have troops on the ground in 19 countries. A senator listed them off. I have the clip on my show.
I mean, it's just unbelievable. And then we assassinate Muammar Gaddafi. And they're having live slave trades in open air markets
Right
in
now.
Libya. And nobody does. One rapper said something, T.I. Nobody else came out. None of the big people that were always complaining about it. And it should be complained. And that's all because of the illegal assassination of the guy. And then the red line, rat line, where they were going to ramp in to go take out Assad. Okay, but they found out the chemicals weren't the chemicals that Assad used. They were actually from the Muammar Gaddafi's war chest that they raided after they illegally took him out. And nobody wants to talk about that because they're so good. They make Benghazi about emails, and everyone's like, "What about the email?"
Yeah.
It's not about emails.
Right.
It's about did they leave that guy out to dry? Because that dude knew that they were training, funding, and arming ISIS, and they let him out to dry, and they knew it was going down, and they just waited till it's over because loose lips sink ships.
Well, in the ISIS thing, ISIS was fighting Assad. So if you watch C-SPAN, they're very open about this shit. They said over and over again, the State Department people, Assad must go. This is our plan. Assad has to go. So that's why we're funding ISIS. It had nothing to do with stopping the terrorists. It never did.
Proxy wars.
Yeah, they wanted this. There's fossil fuel pipelines that they want to go through that area. And then he is not down with this global economic system. Assad must go. And it's been like this for at least a decade, right? He was friends with George W. until he wasn't.
They all were. Every guy we've assassinated is shaking hands with a Bush at some point.
Remember when George Bush looked into Vladimir Putin's eyes? He saw his soul. Remember that?
Yeah.
Remember that? He loved him. Said he used to go fishing at Kennebunkport with his dad and George W. I have pictures of it. So he was a great guy. Remember we did the Russian reset? Remember that? Remember how we laughed at Mitt Romney when he said Russia was our number one geopolitical foe? The friggin' Democrats put out a video making fun of him about it. And all of a sudden, when it becomes convenient, all of a sudden he's our number one political foe. And it's because Saudi Arabia wants to put a gas pipeline through Syria. And Russia doesn't want them to do that because they want to sell the natural gas to Europe, and now Saudi Arabia wants to sell it, and so that's why we're there. And that's why Saudi Arabia funds ISIS. That's where ISIS comes from. And they're like, go knock this guy off, and we'll do a bunch of false flags. And the white helmets are also bullshit.
Total bullshit
Yeah.
that George Clinton, it's like...
It's unbelievable.
Oh, add him to the
What?
CIA list.
100%, dude. It's like, what happened to
So-
liberals? They're anti-free, they're pro-free trade. They're
neoliberals. That's not a
is that?
real liberal. So
Okay.
progressives, so liberals, neoliberalism is pro-war, pro-bank, right? Pro-oil. It's all, there are Republicans who are cool with gay marriage. Right, so they're like right wing. They're pro military industrial complex. They're pro Wall Street. They're anti-worker. That's a neoliberal, and that's pretty much what liberals are too today.
Unbelievable.
Okay? So that's why I call myself a progressive. I don't call myself a liberal. There used to be a song by Phil Oakes, and he's called "Love Me, I'm a Liberal," and he says liberals. Of all there's all shades of political stripes in America, and of the liberals are some of the shadiest. And he said they're to 10% to the left of center in the best of times, and 10% to the right of center when it affects them personally. And then he has this whole song, and it's fantastic. But So I call myself a progressive, right? So I'm anti-war. Both parties are pro-war. You can't get anybody. Elizabeth Warren voted for that bloated $80 extra billion a year to Trump.
She didn't do anything about. I think you talked about on your show. She didn't show up at all to North Dakota, and she's supposedly an Indian, a Native American. Excuse me. She doesn't even show up until it was Obama says enough, and which was still just smoke and mirrors. I mean, because it still kept going.
Yes. So they got it done. They got that pipeline done, and it's already leaked.
Already leaking.
Already leaked, of course.
And it's just so weird because
Barack Obama's going. When Martin Luther King, I think it was Martin Luther King said, if you're those who remain neutral, you are taking the side of the tyrant.
Yeah.
And so that's what Barack Obama did. We're going to let it play out. Remember, and that's what he said about DAPL. We're going to let it play out. Both sides need to calm down. Both sides. Okay, you mean the Tiger Swan? You mean the hired mercenaries who are infiltrating the peaceful water protectors who are just trying? Yeah.
You've talked about how just like the left, this side of left, just anything Trump does, people go nuts on. Now we have this Roseanne situation where, I mean, all I heard forever was like, we need to give women in comedy more opportunity, more representation, and I'm totally down with that. Now a woman who had the number one show on TV, which has multiple female writers on it, read by a show ran by Whitney Cummings, getting pounded on for being too political after we had the Oscars, the Golden Globes, every late night talk show monologue pounding on the right. And listen, I'm Ronan. I'm not on either side. And then they're beating the crap out of Roseanne because she's talking about Donald Trump, sex trafficking, and how he's had this huge number of arrests, which is 100% true. And now they're pounding on her. And I'm going, are you really like making fun of child sex trafficking? Like, didn't I just go through the Me Too movement where it's like, we got to listen to victims, we got to not shun victims, we got to treat them with respect, we have to hear their cries for help, and now you're pounding on these people because she's a Trump person? Like, how do we pivot so quickly?
It's groupthink. So when it comes down to like what happened to liberals, I think what happens is that people have separated themselves into these two fucking teams. You're either a liberal or you're a conservative. And whatever your team says, that's what you think now. And I think that's the really dangerous thing. That's why I've been asked so many times, like, how do you identify? I'm like, I won't label myself.
Ronan.
But there aren't two teams, and that's the
There
thing.
aren't. They're fake.
So, for instance, this last deregulation, they're passing, they're getting rid of the. We talked about it already earlier on the show, and that couldn't have happened without Chuck Schumer. He's the leader of the Democrats, and he could have blocked that in the thing called the motion to proceed, and he didn't, which means he went to Wall Street and said, look, I have to vote against this on the outside, but I've got just enough Democrats for you to, and we're going to make sure it goes through on the motion to proceed, and everything's going to happen. But isn't it amazing? They always get just enough Democrats,
so close.
just enough for every shitty piece of legislation to go through. And the only reason that they weren't allowed to repeal Obamacare is because that's a giveaway to big pharma and the big healthcare. So that actually makes them more money. So that's the thing, that there isn't really two parties. The worst things they do, they're both together on it. Barack Obama opened the Arctic to drilling twice.
Yeah.
Barack Obama made took the wars 2-7. He made the banks bigger. Barack Obama didn't put on a soft shoe and walk with those teachers when they were fucking them over in Wisconsin. He let them fuck them over in Wisconsin. He let the cops crack the heads of peaceful protesters and occupy Wall Street. It is not two parties anymore. And that's why we have Trump. And that's what they don't want people to talk about. They don't want to talk about the system that gave us Trump. They just want to make you think that the problem is Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. No, the problem is our fucked up, corrupt system that gives us nothing but bullshit, which is why half the country's poor, 63% of the country can't afford a $1,000 emergency. And I say, what do you call a system that takes the richest country in the world and renders half of its population poor or low income? That's a failed system. And they don't want you to talk about that. That's what they're really afraid of.
Yeah, and free trade. Let's dude, that is redistribution of the wealth.
Yes,
there's
no such thing as free trade, by the way.
Yeah, it costs jobs and wealth.
So trade is so what they do is they create markets. Markets are created by guys who have stuff to sell, and they create rules that favor them fucking selves. And who makes the rules? The most powerful guy, which is why the World Trade Organization can come in and overrule a local country or a local local state municipality, just like you were talking about labeling beef. They do the same thing with oil tankers, right? If you pass a regulation saying an oil tanker can't come into my port unless it's double hulled, and the World Trade Organization says you are restricting trade, they can over fucking rule you, and they've done that.
Oh my God.
So that's what this is. Yeah, okay. So that's where but people will say, "Oh, you're crazy to talk." No, this is what's actually happening.
But it's another example of like, just like with collusion. You hear free market. I believe in free market. And it's such an easy thing. Like, just dismantle the
How
government
about the
and all will be
Patriot
great.
Act?
Yeah. It's
Well-
like the Patriot. It's the opposite of that.
Yeah.
These
These
are-
labels, people just like suck them in. It sounds good. And I sound smart saying it, but it just falls apart just looking at the details for even a couple minutes.
I want to get into another bullet point you sent me because I found this really interesting. It goes back to Too Big to Fail. FirstNet after 9/11, you kind of sent me that. Tell us a little bit about that.
So right after 9/11, remember when the towers fell? One of the biggest problems we had for the people, our people, is that the cops and the firefighters couldn't talk to each other. They couldn't communicate. And so one of the recommendations that was made that Congress acted on was like, we need to have an emergency responder system that's just for our first responders so they can speak to each other. Great idea. I'm all for it. Well, years and years and years go by. They don't do it. They set aside $7 billion to make this happen. And long story short, they basically just gave the contract for $7 billion to
No bid?
AT&T.
No bid.
I think there might have been bids. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly how it was done, but AT&T got the contract. So now our emergency responder network is literally AT&T. Doesn't that make AT&T too much of our government to fail? and the way this is going to work too is that you're a first responder, you're going to have access to this new network that they're building or whatever. But while we're not in an emergency situation, AT&T gets to sell access to it.
Oh my God.
So we just subsidized AT&T building their new network is what we did with our emergency responder money. And we'll never, ever, ever let this company fail now. We can't.
Here are the victories of neoliberalism. Amazon, they consider that a success story where Jeff Bezos becomes the richest guy in the history of the world while the people who generate that income for him are on welfare and food stamps. Also a success story would be Walmart, where the Walmart family owns more than I think half the country, has more wealth than. And meanwhile, of course, their workers also on government assistance. Isn't that interesting? These capitalist success stories rely on government assistance for their own workers.
How about Walmart coming out against Amazon because they out-Walmarted
Yep,
Walmart?
That's right.
Well, that's the only way we win is when they're fighting with each other, which is actually what they're doing to us. They win when we're fighting with each other. So it works both ways. But yeah, like you notice with net neutrality, it was because like Netflix and it was big companies that were fighting. And so things were happening. And yeah, until the corporations get mad at each other, there's really no change.
Military's out of control. We're spending left and right. And you said something about military buildups in Europe and Asia since 2005. We're doing massive buildups still?
2015.
2015.
It was called the European Deterrence Initiative. They just changed the name. So it's the European Reassurance Initiative now. And yeah, we put in a bunch of battalions, I don't know exactly how many, on the Russian border.
NATO is ramping up, and we are requiring NATO nations to spend a certain percentage of their GDP on defense spending, and we're requiring them to spend it in certain ways, which enrich military-industrial complex. That's happening, right?
Yes, that's definitely happening. So it's like not only are we building up the military, our United States military, but NATO is definitely a part of this too. But we control NATO. Who are we kidding?
Yes.
But what I found out by reading the defense authorization is we're going to do the same shit somewhere in the Pacific region.
Yes.
And I looked it up, and it's a really big region, so I can't tell you yet exactly where it is. We might find out in the new funding law. I'm not sure. But yeah, we're going to do the same thing. So we have it set on one side, and now we're going to go to the China-Russia side and set up some kind of buildup there too. No one knows.
So we just live off of money we receive from Russia. Like, I mean, are they still bailing us out? Are they still buying our bonds? I mean, is that
China? I think is doing.
Yeah, I meant China. Are they still buying our bonds even though we're gearing up to basically surround them?
To be honest with you, I don't know how our money works. I don't know where it comes from or why they think that this is okay. I don't understand it.
I know that I know how the petrodollar works. I know that is why we're doing lots of the things we're doing, because it's at the behest of Saudi Arabia. That's why we care about Syria because Saudi, in fact, John Kerry admitted in front of the Senate that Saudi Arabia offered to pay for the entire military operation if we would go in and overthrow Assad. He said this, they had offered to pay like they have in the past. So that's, again, that doesn't get covered by Anderson Cooper. That doesn't get covered by Rachel Maddow. And so
we can find it.
That's why it's so easy for me to have such a hit show is because I'll tell you those things and people go, really? And they'll look them up and they go, oh my God, that's true.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And, my girlfriend, I can't get her to stop watching the nightly news. I can't get her to stop. She just, it's her crack. I come home and you ever had your girlfriend back in the day walking on you watching porn and you're like trying to turn it off real quick and she's like, what are you doing? You're like, oh, I'm doing nothing. Your pants around your ankles. You're like, oh, man, that's how my girlfriend is with the remote. She's just like, and it's just like she can't stop watching it. And because it makes her feel like she's informed, and I just feel like I think everything's a long game. Send the money out, lower wages. Now I got to work and my wife's got to work, and now we're both working, and none of us have real time to sit down and listen to what's going on. So the best we could do is turn on the TV, and for an hour we think we're being informed, and we're really not. We're just being brainwashed. We're given fake news constantly.
Well, there's two quotes. One from Malcolm X. He said, the newspapers, if you read them long enough, will have you feeling sorry for the oppressors and hating the people that they're oppressing. And which is basically a kind of reworking of another saying I think came from the 1800s is, if you don't read the paper, you're uninformed. If you do, you're misinformed.
It's unbelievable.
Well, if you've ever been in the middle of a news story, you realize, like, holy shit, they're really getting a lot of stuff wrong about this news story I'm a part of.
Yeah.
Right? And then you're like, oh, I wonder if this happens with all the other stories.
I'm sure it's just not about informing. It's about persuading.
Yeah, and it's definitely about an agenda, right? So there's definitely a pro-war agenda in our corporate media. There's no doubt about it. They don't have Phil Donahue got fired from MSNBC because he was against the Iraq War, and that got revealed in a memo that came out that he was too against the war. They even make him have two pro-war people for every one anti-war person he had on his show. That was before they fired him, and then they're just like, fuck it, let's get rid of him. They said they were firing him because of low ratings. He had the highest rated show on the network at the time.
But if you think about how these companies are being funded, you think about all of the money, the billions of dollars now that are spent in our elections, they go right to the politicians, right? Well, where does that money go? It goes to television ads. It goes to newspaper ads. So when you look at what's happening, it's the politicians funding the media, quite literally.
Yes.
So that's why they have to play, because when those advertisers get pulled, the advertisers are the politicians. That's what campaign ads are. That's the whole circle jerk.
It is my theory that television is just a shell game, that the ratings, unless it's like really super high or really super low, don't matter.
Well, Cenk Uger's a perfect example of that. His ratings were huge, and he got kicked off MSNBC.
Yep, didn't matter. Like I said, Phil Donahue, #1 show at the time, they kicked him off because he was going to cost them more money because they were war profiteers, right?
Yeah.
Because MSNBC at the time was owned by General Electric. General Electric, huge defense contractor, and that's my real question for Brian Williams is like, how many checks do you take from a defense contractor in the middle of an illegal war before you stop calling yourself a journalist? Mm-hmm. And the answer is endless. They're none of them are journalists. None of them tell the truth about a war. And the only time he got in trouble was when he got caught doing false stolen valor.
Yeah,
that's the real problem. Was Brian Williams used to bring on retired generals to tell you about the Iraq War. And we always thought they were giving us the truth because they were retired generals, but they were being paid by defense contractors to advocate for more war. Brian Williams never told us about that. The guy who did win a Pulitzer Prize for it in the New York Times, Brian Williams still never told his own audience that those people were lying to us and that they were bought and paid for. And that's why Brian Williams is a piece of shit.
Well, and have you ever noticed the commercials for Boeing and Raytheon and Northrop? Like, what the fuck are they selling me?
Yeah. What am I supposed to do? It's all about controlling the message. And if you don't play ball, they threaten to pull it.
That's right.
But it's like when
they're not funding the investigation; they're funding your non-investigation.
Yeah. They're basically telling you not to do anything. I mean, like when you saw Brittany Murphy die of an overdose, and they were like, "Brittany Murphy dead of natural causes." That's because every ad on that news episode was like a pharmaceutical ad. Mm-hmm. And when you said earlier that it's not just international bankers, I'm gonna tell you, if you go to the highest levels, even past these corporations that you're looking at, above them, it's probably the people who own everything.
And have forever.
They own the banks, they own pharmaceuticals, military industrial complex, and look who advertises. And then if you go to Burger King, Nike, all them, you go far deep enough on who owns that, who that. It all leads to the same thing.
It does. And how do you physically own a company like that? Through the stock market. That's the ownership of it. It's all about having an economy based on the stock market. And like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the Windsors and all those fucking assholes, they have so much money in the market. What was, Jimmy, you might help me with this stat. I think it was something like 80% of the money in the stock market goes to like 400 families.
Oh,
something like that.
I'm not sure about that quote, but it sounds right. That sounds right.
Yeah, it was just an enormous amount of it.
Well,
and when you look at the Great Recession, the recovery was a stock market recovery.
Stock market.
It
yes.
wasn't wages. And
It
I
was
can
not
tell
Main
you,
Street did not get recovered.
No, and if anything, they stole our houses.
Yes.
With the foreclosures and then jacked up all our rents.
Yeah.
Yes.
So.
And Barack Obama gave them a giveaway. The people who, so they started to do that thing where they did mass rentals, right? So it turns out it's hard to do rental houses on a mass scale. And so they were failing, and Barack Obama, on his way out, he bailed out one of those equity firms that was running one of those rental things, which artificially inflates the price of rents and makes it harder for first-time home buyers to have entry into the housing market. So it's literally legislating to screw people over on his way out the door. And then when he came back into public life, what did he do? He went sky surfing with frickin' Branson, and then he did bank speeches for $500,000 at a clip. Right out in the open. Chris Hedges says they steal right out in the open now. They don't even care. They have no shame. And that's what Barack Obama did. But he could get away with it because everybody was distracted with Russia and Trump.
They basically put these buyouts in their budgets now. Yeah. They know it's coming, and they just basically, this is part of our budget now. We're going to be bailed out. And then they had the balls, just like Toys R Us, for this guy to be like, I need my bonus. You're like, nobody's getting money.
Bonus.
What do you mean I'm not getting my bonus? No, dude, you ran the company to the ground. Why are you getting your bonus? That's all it is.
Well, and the bailouts aren't just legal for U.S. banks. They're for foreign banks, too. Because Dodd-Frank did do something about it. It was dismantled a few years ago, again, as attachment to must-sign legislation. But they made it legal not only to bail out our banks, but the foreign ones, too. It's just like, in what universe does that make sense for the American people to do?
We live in a completely corrupt government.
Unchecked, man.
And, you know, what is that famous line that Ron Paul likes to say, you know, in an age of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And
it pisses people off.
And that's why people like us piss people off. And that's why they try to shut people like us up. First, they smear. And then they'll do now they're doing all these other things, algorithm changes and all this other stuff. And as soon as they think you're a little bit of a threat, they're going to come at you.
I have a question. So they're saying within 15 years, we're going to reach carbon-free fusion power. So since so much what we're talking about is broken systems, antiquated systems based on fossil fuels, us being in debt to the Saudis, where would we be in 15 years when the whole world has free fuel?
I mean, you have to have some legislation to even make that happen. Like they're defunding so much of our research and development. I mean, they're doing everything they can because our government right now is captured by fossil fuels. This was one of the shocks to me when I started doing the whole reading of the bills thing. I wasn't expecting fossil fuels to have the stranglehold that they have. So they have Congress for sure. And now the executive branch, it's fucked what's happening in the executive branch. I mean, Mike Pompeo was our CIA director. He's now going to be Secretary of State. He's literally the Koch brothers congressman. Yeah. Like the Koch brothers paid for him to be a congressman. He represented their district in Kansas. Then you had Rex Tillerson, like obviously Secretary of ExxonMobil. Were captured. So is that technology possible? Sure. My husband is a utility scale solar engineer. Like we know that we can do a different thing, but we have to switch the legislators before we can get the money, before we can get the infrastructure, before we can get any of it to happen.
It's going to be nuts. I mean, and let's look at this whole NFL. We got to wrap it up here, but the NFL and the kneeling down and the owners going crazy. Guess how many of those owners are oil guys, giant corporation guys? That's just all to get us not to keep our eye off the ball.
Yeah, it was racism in the last Congress. In this Congress, it's gender wars.
Yeah.
You know, get the women and the men to fight. Have giant rallies. Like you said, Vietnam was a changing point because we did have a lot of people marching in the street. Now, on the anniversary of Trump's inauguration, we're having millions of people march for nothing. Like, it's just a hate march. And I understand that women, the Me Too is completely different, but the Women's March, they're asking for nothing. And this last one was when the
Asking
government was
for
shut
nothing.
down.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz marched in it.
For nothing.
Asking for nothing. And the day this year, the government was shut down on that day, and they still did nothing. If they wanted to support the Democrats, no matter how you feel about DACA, the Democrats were going balls out for that in that move. And you had 1 million people that are supposedly on their side that weren't even aware. So it's like they're also taking protests and making it about fighting each other instead of fighting them.
It's all about that, dude. Is
Splitting us
all
up.
about us fighting with each other. Because the left, whatever progressive like we are, we make change. And the best way to never have change is not get everybody to work
Sam,
together.
I just had to. The progressive left, conservative, libertarian, that divides us too. It does. We don't need to split ourselves up like that because we have a lot of libertarian friends. I know that you're friends with some people who are libertarians that we can agree with on a lot of things. And so I don't think it does us any favors by being like, I am a liberal, I am a progressive, because then you get the groupthink again, where it's like, well, I'm a liberal, so I have to vote for Hillary. It doesn't help us. We're Americans. That's it.
I understand. I mean, your reticence to put labels on things, but it's useful. And it's helpful because you know what where they stand, where they're coming from. If a guy says he's a libertarian, I know he's probably going to be against the war, right? And so that's good. Just like if you don't know where Aleppo is, you probably can't bomb it, right?
Yeah.
I love that, right? So, but you're right. They want to split us up, and they certainly the thing they do fear is the anti-establishment that was shown on both sides. So Bernie Sanders represented people sick and tired of the establishment, and so did Donald Trump. And that scared the hell out of them. And so that's why they're doing Russia and everything that they could possibly do. That's why they pay Rachel Maddow $30,000 a day to talk about Russia instead of talking about the teacher's victory in West Virginia, or to talk about the stuff we're talking about here, or to tell the truth about Syria. They'll never, that's the thing about the mainstream news, they will never, ever tell you the truth about war, and there's never been a time we needed the truth about it more than right now.
I couldn't agree more. What a great way to end. Real quick, Jen, can you tell them about where we can find your podcast?
Yeah, so it's in iHeartRadio, Spotify, everywhere that podcasts are found. It's called Congressional Dish. And the most important thing I do is I don't expect you to trust anything I say. I back up every single thing I say in the show notes to the point of linking to the individual provisions in the laws themselves. It also helps you win arguments. So
I love it, man.
Yeah.
I love what you're doing. I appreciate what you're doing. Jimmy, do you got anything you want to push real quick that maybe our listeners can come and check out your stuff?
Just go to jimmydorcomedy.com. Everything there. I have that YouTube show that people see. There you go.
It's great.
So so God bless America.
You're killing it. You're doing the Lord's work, man. I love watching it. I love checking on your videos.
We just added a date in June 30th. We'll be in Portland at the Alberta Theater. So if anybody's in Portland.
I have the best time doing your shows, and it's really always an honor when you ask me to do it because for the longest time, reindeers wouldn't let Rudolph play in the reindeer games, and you're like the first guy to ever let me do it, and the fact that you guys think I do okay means the world to me. So thank you guys for coming on. I really quick want to thank our friends at Layered. They sent me this whole workout gear. It's basically fashionable. I feel like I'm in my pajamas, but I can go to the nightclub, even though I don't do that anymore, but I do feel good. It's Layered. Okay, go to www.layeredusa.com. They sent us a letter that had a mason.
It was a compass and square, and it was wax sealed,
Which made me nervous. So we want to thank those guys out. Go to layeredusa.com. Any thoughts real quick?
No, it was very much of an honor. Hey, guys, if you go ahead and leave us 5-star reviews on iTunes, it really helps us climb the charts. And we'll look to see you forward in San Francisco.
We got another great show coming up on Thursday. We're doing this. Guys, get to San Francisco. If you ever want to see San Francisco, you ever want to support the show, buy your tickets to San Francisco June 1st. Me, Eddie Bravo, Ryan Davis, and Trez. Guys, thank you so much. We appreciate everything, and we'll see you guys on the other side.
Great show, buddy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks.
It's a
It was
pleasure.
so fun.
Thank you. Hey, are you leaving right now?
My wife's going to come pick me up. She's not here yet.